This is Sessions with Sara Cate and Ashley, a podcast that explores the feelings, emotions, and experiences of what it means to be human in this world. This podcast is intended for educational purposes only and is not meant to replace therapeutic services of any kind. Please refer to the list of references if you need support.
And before you dive in, please like, subscribe, comment, share with anyone you think might also connect with today's session. Our goal is to reach as many people as possible, and we are endlessly grateful for your continued support. So, let's get to it.
Okay. Welcome, everyone, to another Sessions with Sara Cate and Ashley. I'm Sara Cate.
I'm Ashley.
And we are coming at ya today.
Oh, I know. I was waiting for it.
We are coming at you from Denver and hot Atlanta with Ashley, Dr. Ashley Zimmerman. I love saying that. I just love it. Well, Ashley and I hopped on, the call previously to recording, and we came in hot with some topics
Came in hot
in hot Atlanta. For your consideration, it's hot everywhere. It's 94 degrees. It's going to be 94 degrees here today. What's it there, Ashley?
I have no idea. Probably.
Well, your hair looks like it loves the humidity. Let's just be real.
It's really doing well. Yeah.
It is. Ashley's hair is thriving in Atlanta.
Really is. Truly.
It really is. If you haven't watched us on YouTube, you should, just to see Ashley's hair. Takes up the whole screen. Okay. Okay, so today's topic is one that I think in being in relationship we need to consider more, because
that's such a good way to put it.
Right? Like being in relationship will be the hardest thing we ever do. Relationship to our bodies, relationship to another, relationship to our children, relationship to our job. Like being in relationship is the hardest thing that we do, because the second part of that is outside of our control.
Yeah.
The only thing we have control over in a relationship is ourselves. And what does that mean? So the implications of that can be quite intense, right? Like if we have been wounded in relationship, which I would say predominantly the most of us have in some capacity, there's this desire to control outcomes. There's this desire to know what's going to happen and control the other person's reaction or the other person's emotions or whatever it might be. So there's a lot that I think relationship can bring when it comes to navigating rupture and repair.
Yeah.
Which is something that all of the data shows, like it's important to have rupture in relationship, because the repair is where we really learn to trust, and where we really learn to, what are you laughing at?
I'm dying because what you said is so true, that like we need to have rupture, and my body was like, the fuck we do.
Ashley's body, or her stomach leapt into her chest.
No, we need friggin' rainbows and butterflies.
Yeah.
All the time.
And so many of us want that, right? Like so many of us still, after having been wounded in the relationship channel, go into relationship thinking that the perfect one means there's no conflict. And the perfect one means they don't hurt us, or we don't hurt them. Right. And like that is a historically damaging expectation. Yeah. Because humans are fallible. We in even if our intention isn't to harm, it happens. We do that, and we are hurt by other people who don't mean it. And so what do we do? Right? Because when we're talking about, let's say, specifically intimate partnership, Ashley and I had a conversation about, what do we do when like our styles for repair are different? When one person needs silence to process and like figure out what they want to say. So like, and maybe that's their work. Maybe they're trying not to be so reactive. Maybe they're trying not to speak from a place where they haven't understood what they're feeling. And then the other person is like, I need to process. Like, I need to know, I need to work through this right now. Right. What do we do when those two styles or multiple styles, let's say there's multiple of you in a relationship, but when those those styles bump up against each other, you know, in a way that creates more rupture. How do we start to learn to care for ourselves? If, let's say, our partner needs silence and we need process, how do we find that intersection? How do we care for ourselves in that silence? And then how does the other person learn to engage maybe differently, or ask for what they need as far as space goes, in order to kind of create that container of safety still in the relationship, even in that silence of the in between, right? When we're not really ready to repair yet. Ashley, what do you have to say about that? Not that I know the backstory, but like, what do you have to say about that?
Oh man. Well, it's really flipping hard. It's so hard. And I will say,
Okay.
on the other side of the rupture and feeling the repair, being an active part of the repair, but also having the other person be an equally active part of the repair is just so healing for all of those like relationship struggles from previous, right?
Yeah.
I think that it's really interesting coming from a place of somebody who wants to process right away. Process for 5 hours if you want me to, you know? Like
ad nauseum, if you will.
Coming from that place and getting to feel what it's like to be okay in some of that silence is also something that for myself is so validating in a couple of things. One, that like, yeah, okay, like I can do the work, and I've been doing the work and it's showing, but also that like that I am okay, right? Like that I don't constantly have to be worried about abandonment, that I don't have to have all of this. I'm going to say the word unnecessary because it's not that it's not real.
Yeah.
But there's a level of it that I'm speaking about myself, that because of the things that I think about in the way that if I'm not taking care of myself, I bring that on to me, you know, instead of if I am taking care of myself, then some of that like worry, fear, anxiousness might be there, but I'm better able to understand it and work with it. And I think it's when I abandon myself that then I bring on unnecessary suffering, you know?
100%. Well, what you're talking about is then when you say self-abandonment, there's that quality of like, when I leave myself to control them staying.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm going to try to control the outcome that I don't want, which is them leaving. So I'm not going to sit with what I'm feeling. I'm not going to sit with my fear, my anxiety, my worry. I'm going to go towards them and try to make it so they don't leave. Right.
Yeah.
Which is, again, it goes back to that I'm trying to control the uncontrollable, which I think for so many of us I know every single one of my clients, and myself included, have some degree of that. Like I've got to make sure the bad thing doesn't happen. I'm in charge of the bad thing not happening.
Well, and it would be so strange for me to be like, to think about having a conversation with somebody and somebody be like, no, I welcome that really bad thing. Right? Like that's just like normal. Like, of course we don't want the bad thing to happen, you know? And I think also when we talk about like this repair, the rupture and the repair, and we talk about an anxious person and an avoidant person, or two avoidant people, or whatever, whoever is making up the relationship, I think a lot of times the emphasis gets put on, well, I'm avoidant, and so this is how I process, and I'm sorry if that doesn't work for you, but this is what I need. And I'm anxious, and so this is what I need. So you need to come over to my side because that's what I need. Instead of, I think of, you know, you think of like avoidant, anxious and secure,
Yeah.
I think of like secure is that like you're both meeting in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Of like,
You're
yeah,
finding that way.
yeah, you might need some space, and it's not okay for me to just say like, no, you don't deserve that. Like
Mhm.
that's not something you would do in a healthy relationship, you know? And it's also not fair of the other person to say like, your anxiety is ridiculous, get over it.
Yeah. Right.
Right?
Like, I'm not gonna, I don't, yeah. 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 Yeah.
Like that's also not helpful. And so it doesn't become one person just like quantum leaps to the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that, and that middle ground, that middle space in secure. I think it's a spectrum, right? So like the secure spectrum like shifts, right? It can
Yeah.
be what you guys define it as.
Right. Your relationship types, styles creates
Right.
that structure.
Right. And so like where are you guys going to decide to have that like meeting where both
Mm.
of you feel like you can have what you need, whether it's to process or whether it's space prior to processing, but also knowing that the other person isn't just trying to like convert you or force you or, you know, into
Mhm.
like their style.
Which Ashley, I think you made a really good point where you were like, it requires another person, an active other person or persons to
Right.
decide
Right.
to work on this. Like, it
Mhm.
has to be the buy-in of those in the relationship. It can't
Yep.
just be you
Yep.
trying to make the, I call that pushing a river.
Right. And I think that that's where a lot of unresolved, what?
Mhm. It was gonna come out. It was gonna come out.
Unresolvable rupture
Yes.
comes
Wow.
from, because one person just isn't willing. Now, I don't think that like one little happening of somebody being like, no, I'm not, like an anxious person being like, no, I'm not going to give you your space, right? And not, maybe not
Right.
like seeing it in that moment, but if there's a pattern of unwillingness to kind of
Yeah.
like sit back and say like, okay, what part did I play in this? And
Mhm.
what part do I play also in the repair? It's when there's a pattern of that not happening, that's where I think the unresolvable rupture comes in. And that is then, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, right? Like then the decision becomes like, how long are you here?
Mhm.
What actually are you okay with? And then if you're
Right.
not
Where's
okay
your
with it,
boundary?
like you know, then what comes after that? Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and that's, I think this is something that you and I have talked about before too. It's like that it requires information to build that trust, right? Like,
Yeah.
it actually, in relationship, the way that we develop trust is the understanding that you will take accountability for your actions. I trust myself to take accountability for my actions, and we come
Mhm.
back towards each other, and we're both willing to work on it. If
Mhm.
that trust isn't there, to your point, Ashley, then you have to decide where your boundaries lie.
Yeah.
What am I willing to endure?
Yeah.
Where do I feel like I'm sacrificing? Where am I
Mhm.
unhappy? And it's a really hard thing to turn, it back on yourself and be like, am I actually, the one who's allowing this to continue to happen?
Mhm.
Um, which again is it's just another conversation about developing this like sense of self-understanding.
Yeah.
It's not a reason to shame or a reason
Yeah.
to self-criticize. It's more just an opening to
Mhm.
discover and explore more of where your boundaries are and where
Yeah.
you want them to be as like a standard.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that, until I was older, and I didn't actually know, how to have rupture in relationship. And because
Yeah.
it was always just rupture after rupture, there was no repair in
Right.
previous relationships. And
Right.
so for me, I go avoidant, where Ashley was talking about how she could process all day. I'm like, I need an ocean of space. But that's not because I don't want to process. It's because I
Mhm.
don't know what I'm feeling. And until
Mhm.
I know what I'm feeling, I don't want to bring that to the table.
Yeah.
I've learned that Sara in a reactive moment isn't eloquent. She speaks from a place of fear.
Well, I think
And
you're always eloquent.
oh, that's lovely. I have I have a really sharp tongue. And I can say things I do not mean.
Yeah.
I'm extremely perceptive, but with that perception then comes an ability to hurt with words, because I can see people very clearly, very quickly. And so and it's just not I know this about myself, and it is never when I've spoken to people from that place in the past, it hurt them deeply, and it hurt me deeply. Right.
Yeah.
And that's just never a place I want to go back to, because that's not who I want to be in a relationship. But so what I've learned is I need to sit with what I'm actually feeling before I bring it to my partner or before I bring it to a friend. I need to sit with what is happening for me, so that way what I bring is a response, not a reaction.
Yeah.
But that requires time. For the other person, that can feel like shit. And I know that, right? And so something that I was telling Ashley about was there's this clinical psychologist who's predominantly a couples therapist. And he has a book. I really don't love the name of the book. You would probably love the name of the book, Ashley, because you love hearts and flowers and sunshine. But it's called We Do.
Well, okay.
I know. I hate it.
Ball.
But it has some really good, because it's a conversation about attachment styles in relationship. And how if we're just going to distill it down, I don't think that attachment theory really gives a lot of room for the nuance of relationship. So we tried to distill people down into 2 categories: avoidant or anxious, and some iteration of that. But if there are 2 people who have different styles, Ashley was talking about her situation, I was talking about me, right? If there are 2 people who have these, so if Ashley and I were in conflict, she would want to sit down and process, I would need space, and how would we navigate that? And so I loved actually Stan's example of how to kind of take care of yourselves in that in between. And so what he and his wife have decided to do, they've created essentially their format, their structure of how they deal with rupture. And his wife needs contact. She needs to know that he's there, that he's not leaving, because every time they would get into a fight, it would trigger her abandonment wounds, and she would think he was going to abandon her. And he needed space, again, to process what he was feeling before he brought it to her. And so what they said is their non-negotiable was they could go to bed angry. Absolutely. We do not have to work it out tonight. We don't have to resolve it before the end of the day, which is some of the stories out there that you can't go to bed angry, right? Hashtag 1950. But you can go to bed angry, but there just had to be some point of contact. And so their thing was that they just had to touch toes, because that helped her nervous system recognize that his nervous system was still there. He's not trying to leave. He doesn't want to end it, but it gives him also the space to be I'm not ready to talk through this. I'm not ready to resolve this because I don't know what it is quite yet that I'm feeling. And so I think that's really beautiful, because when we think about how our nervous systems function, especially for someone like you, Ashley, tell me what you feel in your body in the silence.
Ooh.
Yep. I sprung it on her, folks.
It's there. No, I don't want to feel it.
Yeah, but truly, because we're talking about nervous system. We're not talking about your partner might be I'm not leaving. Yeah. But your body is they're fucking leaving.
They literally have packed my shit and it's in the driveway.
It's down the road. It's on the damn highway. It's on the Autobahn.
No, but
throw back to last session.
No, but that's literally what it's like. It feels like I have been sucker punched in the gut, and the floor has been ripped out from underneath me.
Say more about that feeling. So you're using the floor has been ripped out from underneath me, which I think is an analogy we use a lot. Can you describe that sensation in your body physically?
Yeah, it's kind of as if literally the floor you were standing on got pulled out from underneath you, and there's nothing but a big black hole underneath. So you're kind of in this free fall, your gut has dropped.
Yes,
gut have no sense. Yeah, you have you've dropped, and you have zero sense of where the ground even is. So there's no connection into the present. Like,
beautiful. Yes.
There's no connection to what's like the room around you. There's zero connection. You're just kind of like literally falling, dropping, out of this reality.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I love the stomach drop. Right. And so many people, when I have clients work through the sense of abandonment that they feel in their body, it is oftentimes exactly that. Like, my stomach drops, but there's nothing to like stop it from drop. It's a free fall.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like when you come over the
doom.
Yes. It's like when you come over the top of a roller coaster and then you start the drop and you're like, oh, why am I here? I've never liked these things. I should never be on them.
I.e. me.
Yeah, same. Actually, now I just don't go on them. But anyways, that drop that you get at the top of a roller coaster, like at the top of the thing, when you start to drop, it's like that, but it doesn't stop. It just keeps going and it's exhausting. You feel a little nauseous to your stomach, or I do. I feel a little nauseous. I feel like I can't eat. I feel like and then what happens, that's like the feeling, that's the sensation. But then like what's going on in my head is this loop. I replay everything over and over and over and over and over. And like what I should have said and what I should have done. And like now, because I said this is going to happen. And because I didn't say that, then this is going to happen. I have 18 scenarios. They all end at the same place of gone.
Yes. And that's what, when you say I can't eat and I get nauseous, like that's an indicator when we're talking about somatic therapy. Whenever there's nausea or there's an inability to eat, that typically means we're bordering on dissociation. Because when our brain gets there, that's essentially freeze, right? We have fight, flight, which is like engagement, but then we have freeze when we're like overwhelmed to a point that like this is what happens is then our stomach and our GI system shut down. We stop digesting. When we go into freeze, we stop digesting. And so like, there is this reality that's like your body, your brain tries to make sense of it by ruminate, like spinning, but your body's informed your brain, like we're in a state of dissociation. We're so terrified. So your brain starts to make up the reasons why. And it typically will fill it with stories. Probably stories that aren't true. So Ashley, how do we take care of ourselves? If our partner needs spaciousness, like I loved the Stan Tatkin example of like just letting your nervous system know their nervous system is there can be a really great way to tell your partner, hey, if you need the time to process, I get it. I need, even if we just have to sleep in the same bed or we just have to have a hug and then we go our separate ways for the next day. I don't care. But like, my body needs to know that you're still here, even if the fight is happening. Right. And this is ultimately to a conversation about a well-developed relationship. You could start early on by naming this. If you know this about yourself in previous relationships, you could say, hey, we're inevitably going to get into conflict. And when we do, it might be a crazy thing, but I might say, we are still fighting. Can I have a hug? And this again is if you're in a safe relationship.
Yes, that is the assumption we are making.
That is the assumption we are making.
So
if not, we have resources.
Yes. So okay. Well, so this is this just happened last week, friends.
Look. Not that you have a present and current example. But if you did, would you share?
But if I did, what happened? And it was exactly that. I was having some really high anxiety. And what I mentioned prior to me, like not taking care of myself, I wasn't acknowledging, I wasn't doing the things that I know help me as a person stay my healthiest, my most engaged, my most present, I just wasn't. And there's no shame in that. Like it freaking happens. Like, what am I going to do? Right. But it eventually got to the point where, and I think this for me was one of the hardest things that I wanted my partner to understand is like the current happenings that like caused this like pretty significant peak of anxiety and freak out actually had nothing to do with like why it was actually happening, if that makes sense. Like it was everything prior, and it was like my threshold just got met And that was like tip of the iceberg, right? I had been climbing
Yeah.
up that roller coaster and it was like the last tick, and that's what sent me over, right? So,
Yep.
and I think that that's really hard for somebody who is anxious
Yeah.
to have somebody in relationship understand that, like, okay, what they what is happening right now
Mm-hmm.
likely isn't just the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's probably some other things, and that is all right, that is
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's just like friggin' anxiety, man. It's just
Mm-hmm.
what friggin' happens. Anyways, so in the silence, right? Because my partner is very much needs the process, the
This
process,
thing.
the processing time. I didn't know, to be honest, I didn't know what I was going to need to feel connected in the silence, because I, full disclosure, have never had a partner who was willing to find the resolve with me. And
Yeah.
so I felt like I was in uncharted territory. I didn't know how, it's always so funny because people are like, you're so, you know what you want, you're in your body, like you're so assertive and like you don't, whatever, would they say these things to me? And I'm like, well,
Mm.
be in intimate relationship with me. And
Till we go into intimate partnership.
yeah, yeah,
Because
it's
it triggers the deepest wound. It's
for
one thing when
sure.
we're running around the world ourselves,
Yeah.
but then when we
Mhm.
give that power to the opportunity that someone could hurt us, that's when it
Right.
gets scary.
Right. And so what I have found out a lot about myself. The sleeping in the same bed, game changer.
Mm-hmm.
Game changer.
Yep.
And we don't always go to bed at the same time, which is like our normal routine. And we didn't go to bed at the same time, probably a good thing. Um, but feeling him come to bed, I was like, oh, he's here.
Okay.
Right?
Mhm.
Like that's what my nervous system needed.
Yep.
And we're both,
Present.
huh?
Present.
Yes. And that was the present.
Even if it's not like in emotional presence,
Right.
just that physical presence
Hmm.
of like, okay,
Yeah.
well, we're still both here.
Yeah.
That's like, that can be one step. That's one building block that you
Yeah.
could use.
Yeah. And then, we had the next day. It's not like it wasn't silent treatment, but we were quiet. We were
Yeah.
quiet. Um, and that I think, had I not been willing to and really wanting to understand how my partner needed to work through this and like
Yeah.
trying to find that like middle ground, I don't think I would have been okay with that silence. I would have pushed and I would have been like, I'm going to text you and see, like, can we talk now? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
I would have
You would have
asked.
gone to to create like what you could control, which is like,
Right.
I'm telling you, we need to communicate.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And instead, I decided really that I just wanted to like do something different. And I allowed for that to be there. And the result of that was when we came and had a conversation, he had had his time, his silence. And I
Mm-hmm.
had been able to like really kind of ask myself some questions. And I feel like that is a really important piece of this for me. And maybe this is helpful for you, is we both had questions for each other, right?
Sure.
But him asking me the questions about my processing and why it got like pretty intense, my emotion, and like what happened. I mean, I had an anxiety attack. So like it got pretty intense.
Yeah. It elevated.
Yeah, I got to also ask myself those same questions. And I think that was, I didn't know that's what I was going to need. But I think that was the catalyst of me providing myself some more um like repair within myself, maybe is how
Mm-hmm.
I should say that. Like I think I
Well,
got a
I hear that you got time to sit with
mm-hmm,
your emotions. So
yeah,
it was actually, in fact, your presence
mm-hmm,
to your emotions
yeah,
that allowed them to settle, right?
yeah,
Because at the end of the day, we have no control over whether our partner stays or leaves, but
mm-hmm,
we have control over our presence and our
yeah,
attendance and our, like our support
Yeah.
of our fear, our worry. You know, that's what I hear in that. Keep going.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that's so true. And so I think, again, like when you don't have examples of what repair looks like I said, I felt like I was flying blind, man. Well,
Yeah.
and I was.
You are.
I really was.
It's new. It's new.
Yeah. And so, but that's, I think I wish so much that, because had I had an example of this growing up, of what like a true rupture and like a true repair could look like, one, it wouldn't have caused so much internal turmoil within myself, because no, I don't want to feel that way. I hate feeling that way. It's awful. Like, I don't want anyone to feel that way. Anybody who has anxiety like that, who like then gets the big stomach drop, I don't want people to feel like that. And I think that,
and yet,
not that it's ever going to 100% never be there. Like, we're going to have times in our life that trigger us. That's not what I'm saying. However, what I am saying is that the more that we process and work through things together, the more that healing and community happens, whether or not you're talking about an intimate relationship or whatever, the more that I heal this within myself. If there's a conflict between me and my sister, things are handled differently. If there's a conflict between me and Sarah, things are going to be handled differently, and it allows for me to exist in this world more authentically for who I am, because that anxious person isn't me at my core. That's not me. That's when I've kind of, again, like moved away from like my authentic presence and who I want to be, right? Like, I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to feel like that, but also I don't want to respond in an anxious way. I really don't, because it's not. If it happens, yes, okay, I'm going to try. Again, I'm not saying, and I don't want anybody to think that this is like a self-shaming thing, because that doesn't get us anywhere, right?
Nope.
However, I do think that to be a responsible human in society, but a responsible part of a relationship, is that I do look at that and what my part like where I played a part in my own abandonment that brought me to the table in this way, that, again, I just don't want to show up in my relationship like that. It has nothing to do with them. It's me not wanting to show up like that, and it's them not wanting to show up in their avoidant way, right? And so that's where we get to come together then, and in that repair, I mean, there's actual repair.
Yeah. Well,
it's not just like we're just fine, we're going to pretend it didn't happen.
Right.
And move on.
Not repair. That's not repair. Moving on is not, in fact, repair. Although previous generations would tell us
that
repair.
And that's not. Yes. And like, I think about that. I'm trying to think of what the example was. I don't know, but if we like have like a stupid disagreement, right? Or we're talking about something and we're like laughing or whatever, and then we're like, no, that's not how it is. And then we like look at each other. Like, I'll be like, are we friends yet? Like, like, did we get over like who gets that last piece of bread or what? Like, oh, that's what it was, because I ate, oh yeah, that was my bad. I ate the last of these like chocolate and peanut butter covered dates. And I was like, well, you left snacks around, pal.
Yeah, don't you? No one. Snacks are not safe around Ashley.
Yeah. So, anyways, then I was like, be friends again. Very different situation, right? Where like that is just like a haha funny. We're gonna pretend like we're moving on, right?
Yeah.
But
it doesn't require anyone to be right or wrong.
Right.
There's a different negotiation level there.
Yeah, exactly. But that's like what you said, our previous generations, that's what they applied to everything.
Oh yeah.
It was
all of our emotional wounds.
Yes. It was applied to all of it. And eventually then you like laugh and you're like, I mean, I think about like my sister and I, sometimes we would fight and then we'd look at each other, start laughing, and it'd be over. And again, some of those situations didn't need like a big discussion or anything like that. Right. But that's what we get told is then how we work through anything. And then, but that's not how, it's just not helpful in all situations.
Well, right. Because the distinction there is when we just want to brush things under the rug, it's a lack of acknowledgement of somebody's emotional experience. Right. And that is, for so many of us, that is the wounding that we experienced growing up was, I'll give you something to cry about it.
Yep.
Calm down. You're making it too big of a deal, right? It's the dismissal. It's the suppression of the emotional experience of that we're having. And that in and of itself is a really unhealthy way. And this is what all of the data and all of the science is backing for developmental ramifications of that style of like parenting or that style of development where there wasn't this reflected, honored emotional experience of children. Like then they don't learn to trust themselves. They don't learn to trust their emotions because they're gaslit out of them. So and then when we become these adults, you didn't know that it was okay for you to ask for X, Y, or Z in the silence, or you know, I need to know that we're still, you know, it could be something as simple as asking your partner to say and it might seem crazy, but it could be something as simple as saying, I'm not breaking up with you. I just need time. And that might seem absurd to ask of them, but what does your nervous system do? Does it allow for spaciousness then for them? When you know that the end of the relationship is not on the table, can you let them have that room? And can they hear from you, I need to have conversation about this. So then can you, as someone who is more avoidant, say, okay, then I'm going to make a concerted effort to actually sit down with myself at some point today so that I can come back to them tomorrow with a conversation. Right? Like that's all that it takes is being able to start these. And so when we're talking about taking care of ourselves, the two things I really want to point out are we can ask our partner, if it is a safe partner for us, we can ask them to show up to a conversation about how are we arranging. And this is best done outside of the conflict, remembering to say, if we have rupture, what does it look like? I'm going to need a hug from you. I'm going to need you to tell me you're not breaking up with me. Or I'm going to need to set a time that we're going to talk about it. Wednesday at noon, right? If it's a Monday and this happens, then I'm going to need until Wednesday at noon. I need a finite time, even if it's that, right? And then that gives you the spaciousness to process when you can. It gives me a deadline. So I know we're not in the abyss of never coming back together, whatever it might be, right? Like there's ways that we can go about it together. And then the second layer of that, Ashley, what you were so brilliantly exploring was like, you're sitting with yourself and being like, what is it that I'm feeling? Because it isn't just about what they're feeling. It's about what you're feeling too. And your presence to your emotions. You know, something I do when even in my own silence, my avoidance isn't because I'm not afraid of the relationship ending. Like my avoidance is kind of instigated by the same thing your anxiousness is, right? But so then what I have to do, I just deal with it differently. And so what I have to do is sit with what I know to be true. And I have a home. You know, I'm privileged enough to go through my resources. I can feed myself. I have a home. I go through the most primal levels of how can I take care of myself? If this relationship ends, if I am alone, quote unquote, do I have everything I need? And sometimes I have for my own nervous system, I have to go through, I can feed myself. I can shelter myself. I have community. I'm okay. I have to go through that. So my body's like, oh, we don't have to go into that level of like freeze and fear that it's ending. I can just be like, no, you're feeling something. You're feeling that gut drop, bottom out experience, ground into what you know your safety is. And it's sometimes as primal as like, can I feed myself? Yes. Okay. Then if I know that's true, is this really that intense? No. So then what am I actually feeling? Like I have to work myself backwards into, I'm insecure. I'm feeling insecure. That's where that's coming from. Or I'm struggling with X. So I need to express that to my partner, not, cause my grenade is like, oh, I need to be single. That's my exit strategy always. I can take care of myself better.
Yep. Totally.
So like, this is what, in that silence, when we have these different styles of relational experience, we have to first look at, how do we advocate in that relationship? What do you need? What do I need? And what does that look like? And then to come to like, and then now I'm going to honor what I am feeling. Nobody else needs to. I am, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what do I know to be true about my safety outside of this relationship?
Yeah. And I think that, yes, those are like the biggest things that again, when you, super important, well, super helpful to have that like discussion about like what you need in the rupture outside of the conflict, right? If it's conflict, it's going to be more challenging to say like, hey, this is what I need. If that other person is like, bye, I gotta go, bye, I don't have time, bye, I gotta go, for both of you, it's just going to be more challenging. And then the last thing that I also want to remind you of is that I think also with like the big culture of, are you anxious? Are you avoidant? And kind of falling back on these attachment styles it's like, it's not a death sentence. It's not a life sentence is what I meant to say. You don't have to, you don't have to carry this for life. You can actually move towards a secure attachment style. And that happens with the repair. That is how you move through that and move towards a more secure. This is not something that you have to, unless you choose to, deal with for the rest of your life. Now, there are obviously things that each one of us is going to like be triggered more in and it's not my, I'm going to be triggered in a way that might be literally no big deal to you. And how you're triggered, I might be able to like, I might feel like, okay, I could handle, like, that's okay. Like that doesn't knock me off. Right. It's not for us to judge what triggers us, and it's not within ourselves, and it's not for us to judge what triggers somebody else in them. It is for us to say, do I want to move more towards a secure attachment style? Because attachment is healthy. We need attachment. We need healthy attachment as humans. And we get to decide if we move towards that. And moving towards that doesn't mean that it's perfect. Moving towards that doesn't mean that every situation we handle perfectly and there's no big disruption. That's not what it is. But it's
the bottom is going to drop out. You're going to feel it.
Yes. Inevitably. And on the other side of that, it's how then we move forward from there. And that is something that you can have control over. That is something that you can decide that you want to feel differently in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And listen, no one knows how to do it.
Right. Literally. And if you need, I'm telling you, man, it was a rough.
It's hard. I mean, this is, like I said, I started the conversation with relationship is the hardest thing we fucking do.
Yeah, it's really hard.
None of us, we're all running around with our own style. We're all running around with our own wounds. We're all running around with our own fears. And the best way to trigger that is by relating to someone. Because then you're going to be like, oh, what are you bringing in here? And what is that bringing up with me? And like, how are we supposed to do this? Right.
Yeah.
And yet, like, if we can understand ourselves in that, like if I can really sit with the parts of Sara that get scared, and I can sit with the parts of Sara that are afraid and to connect, and that have been abandoned before, if I can hold space for those things, then I can bring that into relationship and say, hey, here's the ways that I need care.
Yeah.
I'll link the book. We'll link the book in the show notes. But I do recommend it if you haven't dabbled with the kind of concepts of relating and what your style might be. Stan Tatkin does a really good job of explaining without really like putting people into boxes and saying you're anxious, you're avoidant, blah, blah, blah. There's more of a flow between it, of just even starting to dabble with and he gives really tangible exercises for people in relationship to use with each other in order to really find each other through your different styles. So it's regardless of the title of the book, it's a good read. It's a good resource. So as always, if you need support or care or resources, we do have them listed. Reach out to us. Let us know. Like, subscribe, send us a DM. Tell us how you're doing. Or tell Ashley a joke.
Love a good joke.
Love a good joke.
Oh, man.
But until next time.
Oh, yes. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and we will see ya later.